Hello and welcome to the COMMnections webinar series, brought to you by the Master of Arts in Communication program and the Johns Hopkins University Office of Advanced Academic Programs. Today's event features a discussion on branding beyond Earth, a space story. Please note today's event will be recorded and uploaded to the AAP YouTube channel under the COMMnections playlist. During the program, if you have any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A function, and we will answer as many questions as possible during the latter portion of the event. With that, I will turn over the presentation to our moderator, Dr. Patricia Hernandez, Assistant Program Director and Senior Lecturer for the Master of Arts in Communication program.
Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining this afternoon or whatever time zone it is where you are. I love hosting these monthly webinar series, and I'm specifically very excited about our guest speaker today, Sonya Gavankar-McKay, who's the Senior Director of Digital Strategy for Axiom Space, which is the first commercial space station company. And not only that, she is an expert storyteller and has a exceptional career path, and has done a variety of things, including hosting a syndicated talk show, hosting a podcast, and something that is familiar with some of the students that go to school in person in Washington, D.C. She was in charge of some of the displays and exhibits at the museum, which RIP, that's the Bloomberg Center, where some of you actually are taking classes. So a little connection there. So I'm really happy to welcome Sonya. I'm looking forward to her talk. And at the end, we'll take a Q&A. And so you can type questions in the chat or the Q&A box, and we'll make sure we get to those before the session is over. So welcome, Sonya.
Thanks so much for having me. And yes, for all the people who are at the old museum, new Johns Hopkins, do you feel my spirit in the space still? I hope so. It's a great building, and I'm glad that it lives on with the great work that you all are doing. Thanks so much for the introduction. My life professional career has been very strange and circuitous, but it has allowed me to be perfectly placed for the world that we currently live in, and especially in the commercial space storytelling environment. I want to take you on that journey a little bit. Look forward to answering your questions. I hope there are lots of questions. As we know, as communicators, having conversations are always better than just having somebody kind of scream at you. So welcome to my presentation of Space is Hard. It's so hard, and my career has had all these little touch points to help me communicate that story of space, even though it is a very hard environment to communicate in. So let me take you through my quick story here. I started with a journalism degree in the late 90s as the craft of journalism was changing, mostly because of electronic media. So having that foundation of ethics and gut instinct on what is news was really helpful. I worked for local news stations, I worked for CNN, and then I very quickly found myself in a storytelling role at the museum, where I got to tell the history of news in these very unique ways that was totally new for the time. That transition period allowed me to learn very quickly how to do quality storytelling regardless of the medium that it was being told at. So these little opportunities through my career allowed me to tell stories about the past, but also how we were going to tell stories in the future. Through that process, had a great career doing incredible film work, working with some of my idols as I was growing up and wanted to be a journalist. And then at some point realized that I needed a new story to tell. And I took a very big leap into a goal and a field that I really didn't know a lot about, but was really exciting. And that is space and exploration. Now, I did go to space camp because I am a nerd. But I don't have an engineering degree. I hadn't studied space, but it sure was exciting. And I wanted to be able to tell those compelling stories using the knowledge that I had previously. So let me take you back to 2020 when I joined as a civilian the Space Force to tell the Space Force story. Donald Trump had signed Space Force into reality. He had expedited a plan that was in the works. It was a 5 to 10 year plan to stand up what we now know as Space Force. That plan was compressed into 3 months. In that time, I was brought in to help tell and communicate the Space Force story with a colonel in the Air Force Public Affairs, and there was me doing the digital side of things. I started on March 3rd of 2020, and on March 12th of 2020, I was handed my computer and told, go home, don't come back, we're going into lockdown for COVID. Very soon after, Netflix announced a show called Space Force, and everybody freaked out, especially in the Pentagon.
It has always been my dream to start something from the ground up. But space is hard.
May I suggest that become the new Space Force motto?
So, yeah, it was a little bit of what we call a shit show. But I relied heavily on a methodology that had worked really well and has worked incredibly well for forever, which is an earned, owned, shared system. That methodology focuses on telling one story in different ways, in different forms, to get to that middle orange center, kind of the bullseye of making sure that regardless of how you're hearing a message, you are retaining the same information. So learning how to tell a story, no matter the medium that it's being broadcasted in, and no matter the person who's receiving it, you have to be able to create your packages, create your stories in different ways. So regardless of who is hearing it, whatever time, they're actually walking away with the feeling, with the call to action that you want as a communicator them to get. So still retaining that core that's very important to me, which is honesty, truth, and integrity of a journalist, but being able to tune a message so that the audience is hearing it in the right way. So we do that in everything that we did at the Space Force. We did it in some very unique ways, focused on fashion. Now, not really fashion, but all the firsts that happened in that year of the Space Force. We talked about rolling out the Space Force name tags, the introduction of the uniform, the logo, the motto, what these people in the Space Force were going to be called. We were revealing that dress uniform and how we took that information into what I do now for Axiom Space. So we call it fashion in action, but really it's the visual storytelling of a brand. So every brand has these unique nameplates. The Space Force had this that was sewn from the same company that has done all of the sewing for all of the other branches, the Space Force being the newest branch in the DoD at the time, this is a story that was being told in a very different way for the first time in 75 years. So somebody took this picture and posted it on social, and we heard a lot about it, because not only were you seeing an old emblem on the sleeve, but you were seeing this new Space Force nameplate for the first time. The color was unique, the styling was unique, but we had not explained this to the force or the general public before this went live. This taught us a lot about how to communicate and the order of which we had to communicate. The most important was to the force. The people who were actually wearing the uniforms needed to know the information first. So from a corporate storytelling side, we needed to learn very quickly that we could not have our force and our leaders in the force hear about changes on Twitter. That was going to breed ill will. So we wanted to make sure that we were telling these stories in the right order of importance. So not only was the buy-in from the community immediate, they also became our champions and our amplification. So they would then pick up the story and reshare it with their good feelings, their good vibes, their feelings on top of it that would reinforce how the general public felt about it. And we saw it across the board. Very quickly, our not only space news, but traditional news media was picking up the story, but also picking up what we were putting out directly. So journalists were lifting what we put on social media directly from our feeds and just cutting and pasting, which we thought was great because we were telling them the story we wanted them to tell. It gave us a lot of opportunity to do, again, that one message in very different ways, but having the same outcome at the end of the day, regardless of who was telling the story. Our next story that we told was our logo and brand. Now, this may look familiar to you now, but in 2020, boy, people had a lot to say. Really, they had a lot of feelings. So we had to prime the battlefield for how people should feel about it. So once again, we reached out to the force first. They saw this imagery first. They were explained the imagery first. Then we followed on social media with explainers of what this new logo meant, the history of it, because very quickly, everybody thought this either looks like a car logo or this looks like something from Star Trek. So we explained the legacy of the Delta. The reason why Star Trek uses the Delta is because it comes from a space legacy. So explaining what the Polaris is, explaining all the little nuances within this logo allowed people to still say that it looked recognizable to them, but why it was recognizable to them was also really important. After that, it became who our people were and what they stood for. So this was a really great opportunity. This ended up happening right at about the first anniversary of Space Force standing up. So we had this opportunity to reinforce what we'd already put out, the logo of the Delta, the Space Force name, and now we're adding to it who our people are. They're called Guardians. But what are they guarding? Why are they called Guardians? And what are they standing for? So we, again, put very visually, because as we know, especially on social media, this is a very visual platform, who we are, why we are, and we put out explainers. But we laid a level of authority on top of that. The head of the Space Council is the vice president every administration. And that year, it was a Trump administration, so Mike Pence was the head of the Space Council. So we allowed him to reveal the name of the Guardians simultaneously. So he's at the White House making this announcement, not only to the press, but to Guardians who are there in the audience. Simultaneously, we're in the Pentagon watching the live stream with our folks there who are saying he's about to say the name Guardian. As soon as he says Guardians, as soon as that logo goes up, we post everywhere on social. We changed every single website of the Space Force to reflect what had just been announced. So if you're hearing it on the news or if you're watching it and you think, what am I hearing? And you go and you Google it, everything reflects this new paradigm. So again, we saw this reflected not only in the news coverage, but the images that were chosen. Why we chose to put this same image behind the vice president, so it was repeating and reinforcing what was being said. Because as we know, people have short attention spans. Hope you're still with me. They have short attention spans. So if you're hearing it in little snippets or you're just viewing it, you're getting that same message. Then came our uniforms. Oh, the uniforms. Oh, I may still have PTSD from the uniforms. One thing I learned from my time at the museum is that a visceral experience for our audience allows us to have immediate pickup and buy-in from the audience. So we had this uniform that had a lot of callbacks to different parts of military history. There was a lot going on in this uniform. And so we were given quick access to tell the story of the uniform. We chose a military-focused Air Force, Space Force event to roll out and to announce this uniform. Now, I had a lot of concerns about this uniform because, like I said, there's a lot going on, and change is hard for people. So I was worried about any little thing that the force or the general public could say or make fun of with this uniform. So we were very prescriptive in how we told the story. One, the uniform for the first time in 75 years was built around the female form first. So the female uniform was designed first, and then extrapolated from. So there's a lot that can be told in that story. So we purposefully chose two people to represent the Force. We placed the female in front and we put the male uniform behind, again, to reinforce that story of the female goes first in this storytelling of this uniform. We, again, put out this prototype first. Again, we called it a prototype mostly because the entire force wasn't going to get those uniforms immediately, but also it allowed us to protect ourselves from people who were wildly opposed to it. Like, no, this is work in action. We chose to show this uniform terrestrially. Mostly when new uniforms come out, they're a very static image. They're a very prescriptive image. It's a very sanitized image that shows how you're supposed to wear the uniform. We chose to tell this story in a natural light way because we wanted to tell it as if it was a story about the people on Earth who are wearing the uniform, protecting us for space. So again, all these choices being made, particularly also choices made about who the woman was. These are both Guardians in the Space Force. They're both active members of the Space Force. But we chose what kind of hairstyles, particularly the female Guardian wore for this picture. We wanted it to reflect who she was. This is a style of hair that is within regulation and also the style of hair that she wears regularly. So it was very, very specific choices that we made because we wanted that to be communicated instantly in this one picture. So this picture went out online in the same moment that General Raymond, who you can see at the lower bottom part of your screen here, he was the chief of Space Force, our first chief of space. Notice in this picture, he does not wear the uniform. So he gave his State of the Space Force address. And at the end, he said, I want to bring out the uniform. And our two Guardians walked out, and the pants were weird. The female pants were weird. They were bunchy. They didn't look like that in rehearsal. I don't know why it looked like that. This was possibly the best thing that could have happened to us because everybody focused on the wonky pants. And everybody on social media talked about the pants, which was the best possible scenario. So we very quickly went back to social and we said, we heard your feedback, new pants, new fit coming soon. Didn't need to explain anything. We all saw the problem. I will tell you that getting this picture from the uniform department and from the people who make the uniforms was incredibly difficult. I was like, I want like tape and I want, like scissors, like, the shears that you use to cut the pant fabric and just, lay it out and make it look like, just pretty. This is maybe picture 13 that they sent me because there wasn't a lot of pants uniform fabric left. And so finally we got there and finally we were able to put out this image. But again, controlling how people feel about something, you can plan for every scenario, but you can't plan on pants looking wonky when you bring them out on stage. Oh, you can plan for everything. So then we move on to where we were. So after about 2-ish years, I decided that was a pretty awesome run at Space Force. We got a chance to roll out all of the firsts. We got a chance to mature how we were telling the story. We made impact in how other branches of the service told their military stories. It was a fantastic time to work with an incredible group of, in this case, Air Force public affairs officers who did fantastic creative work. And we gave them the opportunity to do very non-traditional storytelling. So it was a fantastic time and a fantastic time to move on to commercial space. So in an odd turn of events, the colonel at Space Force Public Affairs, who I had been working with, was retiring. And she was moving to Houston. And simultaneously, both of us were speaking to the same commercial company about a job in communications. So she and I both left Space Force to go and do this same work for the commercial space company, Axiom Space. So now we take that same methodology of earned, owned, and shared, and we bring it to what we're doing for commercial space. We're doing it for a startup. Sure, Space Force was a startup. It was a new branch. We were learning new things, doing it in unique ways, but doing it now for a commercial company. There are many commercial space companies, but few who are doing what we're doing at Axiom Space. But we had learned a lot in our time at Space Force. Some of those things were you can only do your firsts once, and you don't need to rush to failure. If nobody knows that you're going to announce your first, take your time, do it right. All of our lessons learned, again, from fashion, work with our lunar spacesuits. Axiom Space is doing the spacesuit for the return to the lunar surface. Artemis 2 should be launching at the beginning of March no earlier than March 6th is the targeted date. That is the flyby. It's the practice for the lunar landing that will happen on Artemis 3. The Artemis 3 astronauts will be wearing our lunar spacesuit. We, again, took that formula of visceral live event to roll out the story and the visual of our lunar spacesuit. So this is when we first announced our suit. We did it with our Axiom branded colors to make sure that we were telling our story. And we put all of the experts on stage. On the right side of the stage here, stage right, stage left, is our Axiom Space leadership here. So our founders and our Axiom suit, our project managers. And then on the left side are our NASA folks. So NASA is actually leasing these suits from us. So having them on stage to say, yeah, these are our guys, this is the suit, lends that credibility. So being able to communicate that not only to the press, but to the kids who are in the audience, helped us tell that story. I want to give you a little look.
In space, to dress for success is a matter of survival.
How hard is this?
Very. It is very, very challenging. The glove bladder is just kind of the inner layer.
Russell Ralston works for Axiom Space. Last September, NASA hired the Houston Aerospace Company to build a new spacesuit for the first Artemis moon landing mission to the lunar South Pole. Here, shadowed craters are home to some of the coldest temperatures in the solar system, almost 400 degrees below zero.
Going into a permanently shaded region on the moon it's something that's never been done before by anything.
NASA spent 15 years developing its own next-generation moon suit before outsourcing the project to Axiom.
So our lunar spacesuit went through several iterations before we partnered with Prada. Now, I talked about fashion and storytelling with our different rollouts, and Prada has come on board not as fashion, but for their expertise. We have partnered with several different companies, Prada on the sewing, Oakley on the visor of the spacesuit. Goo, which is a performance meal replacement, is actually going to be how you can be in your suit for 12 hours at a time and actually eat something. So we have different people who are coming into this storytelling who bring their expertise, who never saw themselves as space companies, are now part of the space story. Prada, actually, their expertise comes in performance sewing for sailing. So their fabrication, their sewing is informing how we do our work. And it's fascinating to see how that story is told. Again, telling it in a kind of visceral way of putting it in places that we can control the announcement, how we used our earned media, our shared media to tell that same story. So then space news, traditional news picked up the story. But also, who wouldn't want to tell a cool story about Prada and a U.S. commercial space company going to the moon together? So again, being able to package the story for easy consumption on different platforms. So this is just a little bit about how we told that story. Strategically embargoed storytelling, stories that really carried our key messages, using our teammates on Prada to help us with that story, and then feeding our social media and our website to actually tell that story visually so that news media could essentially scrape that information from our owned sources to then use on their mediums. Really important. And of course, every top publication wanted to cover us because we, again, launched this at one of the largest storytelling or largest space events called IAF. That is one of the biggest events of the year. It happened to be in Italy, home of Prada, so it was a great opportunity to do that. The other thing that's really important to us is that we're always looking at data. We are constantly looking at how not only our brand is playing, but how our posts are playing. So we can constantly adjust based on how our audience is receiving information and be aware of who is receiving our information. So we're always looking at data to make sure we're doing our work and scaling for the next steps. Mentions by location are just as important. Let me now get to human spaceflight, which everybody loves. AX-1 was a mission in 2022 before I got to Axiom Space. This was the first commercial human spaceflight mission to the ISS. So you hear a lot about commercial space travel or private space travel. Most of the time they're suborbital, meaning that they are not orbiting the Earth. We are actually going out to the ISS. Our astronauts spend a week to 2 weeks on the ISS doing research while they're up there. So in 2022, we weren't part of the team to tell that story. And it was hard to tell a story about 3 very wealthy people going to the ISS. That's a hard story to tell. It's an international community, but it's a hard story to tell. So when we came on, we had a new space story. Oops. Moving on. Hold on. Let me skip ahead here. We had a new space story to tell with. Oh, I'm skipping way ahead. Stand by. I can put people into space, but I can't tell the story here. So by our next space flight, we could tell a different story in a different way. Oh, come on.
4 astronauts are getting ready to dock at the International Space Station after their SpaceX rocket lifted off last night. The Axiom 2 flight is the second ever private mission to the orbiting lab.
This new space era is redefining the right stuff.
You do need that sense of, I want to explore, I want to try something new. It's helpful to have an objective. I think that will build the strongest group of people in space.
This crew will do a lot more than take selfies and look down on Earth. They'll perform more than 20 science experiments, including microgravity's effect on stem cell research. And Nate, if I was going to space, I'd want Peggy Whitson as my commander.
No doubt about it. Mark, thank you.
We have awesome staff astronauts on our team. For AX-1 and 3, we had Michael Lopez Alegria. He is a highly decorated space astronaut. He's a highly decorated astronaut. He has spent more time doing spacewalks than anybody else. Peggy Whitson is the most decorated U.S. astronaut in history. She spent the most amount of time in space than anyone else. She was the first female commander of the ISS. She's awesome. So again, we can tell that story differently with an international crew from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, one being a woman and one being a private astronaut from the United States. Again, focusing on that story of science and science for good to build opportunities for countries who had never been to space was a different story that we could tell that we learned again from. So by our third mission, Axiom Mission 3, we were able to tune those stories to get the most amount of impact for the countries that were flying with us, because return on investment is important for us, but important for the countries that are flying with us. So we were able to look at our data to make sure that countries like Turkey, who was flying on this mission, was seeing huge results in their earned, shared, owned platforms and how the languages were talking about that AX-3 mission. So again, very important to tune how you're telling the story, how you're doing it on different platforms, now in different countries, in different languages, so people are understanding the mission, not only of our country, but of their home country and why they're going to space. And again, these are countries that have never been to the ISS before. So this is their first person going to the International Space Station ever. So they want to tell that story right the first time. We don't want to rush to failure, but they don't have that expertise that we have, and we can help guide them along the way. We're heading into AX-5 now, our 5th mission to the ISS. This will be a whole new crew, a whole new group of people, and we will once again take these lessons learned throughout the entirety of my career to be able to say, what are your goals as a country, as a crew member? Let's help craft this so that way we can do your storytelling in the right way. Taking advantage again of earned, owned, and shared replicating that story across the board to make sure that everybody's hearing it in the right way, in the right time, in the right place, just when people need it. That's my story. Space is hard. It's really hard to tell a story about something that is so visually hard to capture. And as a visual person, I'm always looking for ways to tell a compelling story in a new way and making sure that I excite the next generation of not only storytellers, but influence how the next generation of storytellers are telling their own terrestrial story, regardless of what it is. I think we have a little bit of time for questions. Let's see if I stopped on time. I sort of did. So I'm open to your questions of whatever you'd like to ask.
Thank you so much. That was fantastic. And I, as someone who does a lot of presentations, I appreciated the slide designs, the incorporation of videos and graphics. So fantastic job. Thank you.
I'm trying to share my screen here, but I'm not. See, space is hard. PowerPoint is hard.
So when it comes to the formula of earned, owned, and shared media, my experience these days is that owned is the most important due to fewer journalists in the trust desert, followed by shared. It's crucial to tell your story before someone else does. Do you agree?
I do, but I think there's also, it's important to think about how LLMs are scraping information. So many people are using that as the important place that they're going to first for how they're doing their, how they're getting information. So I think it's really important for people to have the truth on their website and across all of their platforms, so they can have one place for particularly LLMs to go and scrape information. I also think it's important for folks to be able to control their message and be able to point to one source of truth being their messaging on their website. So yeah, start with your earned and then extrapolate out from there.
Great, thank you. And I have a question. I noticed the news clips. Obviously, you got a lot of news coverage, but the news clips you showed were from CBS.
Yes, it's like our CBS friend there.
I was going to say, okay, so you have, and that's another important aspect too of having those people that you're going to go to that they're going to pick up whatever you're putting out there. So that's great.
Yeah, I think that is part of our job, is to not be friends. I mean, I always struggle with this when people are like, "Oh, I'm friends with reporters." Yeah, that's not really the relationship. But having good relationships where you can actually work with people and be able to, again, help them tell the story that they need to tell to their audience is a great relationship to have.
Yeah, exactly. And I love that you talked about, storytelling regardless of the medium. And it's important to know how to communicate for each platform. But again, it's still the same principles. I teach theory of mass communication. I tell my students, just because this theory was developed in the 1940s doesn't mean it's not relevant. So the theory still applies, or you add and build on it. But yeah, same principles. I'm just using a different.
And I think if I can jump in, I think that's one of the things that I learned from the museum is, you're going through the history of electronic storytelling. So you're looking at radio, then television, then film, then HD, then social media. Like, how do you tell a story, a compelling story across all those mediums? It doesn't really matter if the story is crafted correctly, if it is accurate. Why are we still so compelled by watching the Hindenburg and hearing the Hindenburg explode? It's because it is that visceral experience, that truth in storytelling.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Let's see. And you also talked about the order in which you communicate and how important it was to explain the logo and why the use of the logo is important. So one of the things I find fascinating is who was in the decision. I can imagine there was a lot of people in the decision-making process for the design of the uniforms.
So there was
someone on the communication team.
There was a person on the communication team on the late end. So one of the things that I demanded, they were very hush hush because they didn't want any leaks. So there was a small group that was, their expertise is making uniforms. They know what fabrics they have available, what is most cost efficient. They were pulling from heraldry that they knew about, and I demanded to see that uniform early on, because I said you have few people in this group that has kind of the visual eye and awareness who can say that's not a good uniform, or here's another reference point that you're not aware of. So it's hard to have a closed amount of people who can see something because you're worried about leaks, but you have to have a different group of people in that team who see things differently, because we all see that thing online, like, oh, Target selling this shirt and nobody thought this was offensive. Like, yeah, you need to have a couple more people in the room to say, like, yeah, this is offensive to this group of people because of this reason.
Right.
So I think that was, I was involved not in a decision making, but in okay, well, let me see what you have. Let me see how we can tell this story. And again, we relied on, so the uniform, again, is a lot. There's a collar that was a reference to this thing. And also the Space Force was, in those early days, pulled from different branches of service. So if you were a space operator in the Army, you had the option of transferring into the Space Force. So we were pulling uniform visual identity from different branches as well, because of that kind of, we're pulling from different branches to tell the story about the Space Force. But people don't really know that. So, So what we did was to tell that story, we whittled it down to those different pieces. So the buttons meant a specific thing. The cut of the suit meant a different thing. The color, the nameplates all meant something different. So instead of saying the nameplates herald back to the tank battalions, instead of saying it that way, we used voices of Guardians who would come in from other branches talking about why they had decided to join the Space Force. So they were telling their personalized stories as we were focusing on different elements of the suit. So that is what we put out online before the suit was announced. So, these close-ups, you don't really know what you're seeing as a whole.
Right.
But you're seeing, oh, those buttons are really cool. Oh, that's a really interesting notch. Oh, if I'm in the Army, and then over that is like, as an Army, blah, blah, blah. These things all tie together. So when you see the whole piece, you've already bought into the whole story.
Yeah. And how that just goes to demonstrate everything communicates a message, as I said, to the button, to whatever, the stripe, the location, etc. So yeah. And this is not something, that we talk about often, but you've got so many good examples. And then I loved how you're quick with the social letter. I guess it took a little while to get the right picture, but with using the feedback, and even, your team acknowledged that, the pants needed some adjustments.
You can't deny it. You look at it, you're like, well, that's bad.
Well, I won't go into that, but so that's great. And we, like you mentioned, with shirts that have something that people find controversial, you always wonder with these crisis, situations of like, who was in that room? Who was making those decisions? And I appreciate your advocacy to make sure that someone, yourself, was able to be in the room and give that different perspective. And for the students on the call, that is so important. We often talk about, I always say I love my job because I always have new content, and it's over and over again, companies and organizations make similar mistakes. And so I appreciate that.
The thing that was really hard for us as well, which I didn't talk about in this presentation, but so you've got units all over the world who are a Space Force unit, and they all have social teams as well. And so those people are trying to tell their story, and they're trying to get a cohesive voice for all of us was really hard, because people wanted that immediate feel-good response of likes and engagement. And so we saw a lot of Star Wars stuff, like promotion days with Star Wars. And we were like, you got to stop with the stormtroopers. Right. And, and so it was really hard, because they're like, oh, well, the kids love it. Okay, fine. Do it as a kid's day.
Right.
Then present it like that. But, it's the thing that we kept having to say was, we are not chasing pop culture. We are influencing pop culture. You are not going to feel it today. You're not going to feel it now or tomorrow, but you're going to feel it 3 years from now when there is a sudden surge of weird buttons down suits. I mean, I cannot tell you, suddenly, like, that's the thing where everybody wants a suit. Not everybody, but there are a lot of, prom jackets that are these horizontal buttons. So it's been 5 years, but, everybody in the moment was like, that's weird. Okay, but you got to present it in a different way, and you just have to hold on knowing that if you're true to the voice of your organization, it will play out in the right way. And if things go sideways, to own up to it quickly. And you don't have to be cute. You don't have to make a thing about it. You just have to acknowledge it and move on and do better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you made me think of, and I'm sure you have something to say about the Cracker Barrel. They tried rebranding with a new logo that completely, they changed back to the original logo. And that's another thing too, as you know, what has changed over the years is how much more powerful public opinion is because of social media. And so it is important to get it right the first time.
Yeah.
Let's see what else I have here. So speaking of fashion, so I'd love to know if you can tell me more about, you mentioned having Prada. So like, who was it that was like, did the research or thought like, did you pitch it to other companies and Prada was one that you landed on an agreement? So if you could talk a little bit more about that.
Well, the great thing about working in the commercial environment is that you can make these calls. You can call, and our suit sewers are, come from varied backgrounds. And so they have a background in not only engineering, but, one of our sewers cut his teeth at Cirque du Soleil. So he does high performance sewing for in fabrics that need to go through the repetitive nature of that work, and then also be usable day after day, show after show. So everybody comes with all this background. So when there was a time where they were having an issue with, I think it was with the bend in the elbow. So they were like, we're using too much fabric here. It's adding too much weight. Who knows what, So the call starts going out. Who do we know who can kind of give us some insight, give us some understanding? And we've made a lot of friends, and a lot of people are following through the years the successes that we've had and have come to us with, I have an expertise in this. Is this a need that you have? And we rely on them. And at some point, that informal conversation turns into a formal partnership where they're actually working in part of the team. So that's, it's one of those things like Russell, who you saw in the video about the spacesuits, Oakley, who's doing our visor. We were talking about the visor. There was some issue with the visor. Russell's first pair of sunglasses that he bought himself with his lawn mowing money were Oakley's, because he wanted Oakley's because he liked them. And then he understood the performance protection of Oakley's. So he's been carrying that since he was mowing lawns with money. And so now he's, in charge of building the spacesuit. And so he calls Oakley and says, hey, I know you have this expertise. We're building the lunar spacesuit. Can you give us some advice? Like, nobody at Oakley is going to be like, no, thanks. Yeah. So they're all excited. And we've learned just as much, and especially in storytelling, from Oakley on, knowing who you are and how you tell your story and why you tell your story has been a great relationship for us. And so now we all get to go to the moon together.
Yeah. No, I love that. And, even when you're, teaching or when I'm talking to people about, products, and like Oakley couldn't have planned for him to buy those first pair of glasses. And then, however long years later, now they have a connection to space. Like, you just never know. So I love that personal story. And that's exactly what, PR and storytelling is all about, making sure that those stories are getting out. So that's
and that you find those stories. And, sometimes, I honestly, we told that story maybe for the first time at Oakley at the rollout. And I was like, Russell, why Oakley? And he was like, oh man, my first pair of sunglasses were Oakley. I was like, stop talking. We're doing this on stage. We're
exactly.
This is great. Like, it's magical because, you could make that story up, but it doesn't feel the same when you can see the guy who's building the lunar spacesuit sort of go back in his mind and tell this story. And then the Oakley, president is standing next to him, just as giddy. I mean, it's a moment.
Yeah. And that's something that, marketing can't do. Yeah, and you mentioned about the launch at the biggest conference and the importance of timing. So can you talk about the decision, because it could also be a risk. So the decision behind that.
Yeah. So, we know what our flagship opportunities are. Mm-hmm. They're annual opportunities and they come around every year. So if it doesn't happen this year, we can kind of, we can look for next year. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing wrong with that. So that is one thing, is to know what your flagship moments and your opportunities are, so you can identify the delta of where your messaging kind of aligns. Mm-hmm. South by Southwest is one of those things where people are like, South by Southwest is happening. I'm like, people, it is February. It is way too late to be talking about South by Southwest. Like, we can talk about it for 2 years from now. This is not the moment. So don't rush to failure just because you have something. The opportunity is there. So, in this case, the Prada thing was happening. Mm-hmm. This big space conference was happening in Italy, where Prada is. So, like, all things combined, but it also happened the same week as the spring Milan or spring fashion shows. Maybe not. Good. So, not a great time for Prada. So, this is the other thing, is, working in communications, people are like, we don't have enough people, we don't have enough budget. Prada doesn't have enough people, Prada doesn't have enough budget. So you're never going to get enough people, you're never going to get enough budget. Stop focusing on that. So, we came into it thinking like, Prada's got this. And Prada's like, we need your help. And nothing feels better than that.
Yeah, no kidding.
So it becomes teamwork again. So we're there. They say, we're going to bring this fashion reporting group to tell the story. This is going to be the embargoed group that we're bringing because of our relationships. We bring the space relationships. We bring this target event that's happening in a place that Prada really knows well. So now it's really a team effort of storytelling, and we're working together to make sure that, the story isn't Prada, the story isn't Axiom, nor is the story Prada and Axiom. The story is the suit. Mm-hmm. You can't tell the story of the suit without Prada and Axiom and Oakley and everybody else and the engineers, and then you make it a human story. So kind of looking for all of those opportunities is really important. And then being able to kind of stand back to look at the data and say, oh, this is what's sticking. This is what people are interested in. I mean, it's happened with our human spaceflight missions, where you think it's going to be one thing and it's a whole other thing. Like, we thought it was going to be one thing. Turns out people are hot for science. They want to know all about the science that's happening in space. So we totally change how we tell the story to be science. Mm-hmm. And that gets more pickup because it's of interest to people. So why keep that away from folks? And that story's there. We're not making anything up.
Right. And what you mentioned about analytics, and so what kind of analytics and how often and what tools do you use so you can understand that actually people want to hear about the science?
So we use meltwater. We love meltwater, mostly because when I call and I say like, it's not working out, like, they will actually help me. So they've been great partners with us. But you also need to know what you're looking for. So understanding not only your goal for every event, so you want to move the needle on this, why, and this is how you're going to do it. Mm-hmm. So you can then look back and say, it either worked or it didn't, but you also have to be, if you understand the reasoning why you're doing it and the goal for that engagement, you are then able to open your aperture enough to see other opportunities. You can see how failures become opportunities. Then you can scale for your next event. So we honestly don't look in shorter term than a month. So we'll look like, we're always looking, but we don't do reporting for less than 30 days because the more data we have, the better. We can get an instantaneous kind of spike and know that like, oh, it's doing well, it's playing well. But we don't really look for that anymore.
Okay, great. And I'm going to keep asking questions, but if anyone has any questions, I will definitely read off your question, but I'll just keep asking questions so that I have them. But please, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box. And so we have some students on, and I know that they're always looking for a career advice. And so given how successful you've been in your career and continue to
doesn't feel like that
you
always.
evolve in the field. If you have, just any career advice for students that are, in communication, will be going out and looking and are looking for jobs now in the communication field.
So I think the big thing that I'm seeing it, it really, I think it does depend on where your how much experience you have and how that plays into what you do. And I think the big thing that I'm seeing with the people on that I work with and teams that I work with is that you have to trust the expertise of the people who are leading you. So there's a reason why you're being given something to execute. So being able to execute that, but then bringing your own viewpoints to the table is really important. So just like I said with the uniform, everybody on the team has a unique viewpoint that I think is very valid. Knowing how to bring up that viewpoint is really important, and especially when to bring it up. So being able to execute the task first and then say like, okay, so you asked for A, I have given you A, but I think I could do better if I gave you B. So here's A, but can I give you B? Here's what B would look like. 99% of the time, I'm going to say, yes, go give me B and C, and give me like a D too, because I feel like you're onto something there. The team at Space Force did that so incredibly well. They executed, and then they came back and said, I think I have an idea of how to make it better. And it inevitably, they always had a better idea, but they were building on something that I knew was working, and then they were adding the icing to the cake.
Yeah, no, that's a great example. Actually, that just happened today. I delivered a draft of a strategic plan for PRSA, and they did focus groups, and they just had more ways to improve it. So that's a great example.
And I mean, it hurts all of us, that it hurts all of us when somebody is like, yeah, that's not what I asked for. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Or, I say to my boss regularly, and I always call it calibrating. It's like, I need you to dump your brain into mine so I can calibrate myself. So what I'm giving you is what you actually want, because you don't really, my boss doesn't have time to really articulate to me what she wants. It's just like a drive by. And we're also, we're all like remote. So she's like, I need this thing. And I'm like, I don't know, girl, what you're saying to me. So let me calibrate and mind meld with you so that way I can give you what you want. And then also make it better. But at the same time, it's just important to know where you fit into the whole system, so that way the ultimate goal. And to, you're allowed to be hurt when your document comes back to you and it's just like red. Like I'm like horrified, and it's regularly I'll just like send back like pictures of Carrie, like memes of Carrie to my boss, like thanks for the feedback. It happens, so feel bad, move on, do better.
Great. And then if you could think about one of the biggest challenges you've had to overcome in your career and how you went about overcoming that challenge.
I think the biggest challenge that I have is that, my career, I do a lot of different things, and I've got my fingers in a lot of different things at the same time, but I stay in one place a lot. So I am very loyal to the people who I work with, and maybe stay too long. So sometimes I don't see when I've outgrown a place and where I can move on to be reinvigorated by new voices and new styles.
Yeah, and it sounds like you love what you do right now.
I do. It's fun. I'm an extrovert, and I like learning about new people. I listen to podcasts on 1.2 speed because I want to burn through them as quickly as possible. I want to be able to send them to my friend and be like, oh, this was really interesting. I'll send that book to a friend of mine. I love being able to have all these reference points to pull from, because it just makes me more powerful in the moment.
Great. And I think I might have said the last question the last time, but one more. If you could just talk about the use of AI in your company. I just saw today on the news, I'm forgetting which company, but they're basically giving incentives to employees you better start using our AI tools or you're out of here.
Wow.
Yeah.
So AI is really rough for us because, so first of all, I'm an old person again. So I'm like, no, get off my lawn.
Yeah.
But what we do is highly proprietary. So we're working with proprietary, copyrighted things that we're protecting. If I put it into AI, I am screwing myself.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
We don't use ChatGPT. We don't use AI. We rely on ourselves and our team to make us better. But you know, there is something there. I do put our reference words into AI to see what comes back to help inform what I'm putting out. So again, I know it's scraping from places.
Right.
I need to make sure it's scraping the right stuff and it's not coming back with, you know, our company is called Axiom Space.
Mm-hmm.
I regularly get emails from people who are like, thanks so much, Axiom, all caps. I'm like, where did this come from? Why is this? Who put this out there? So being able to see where the anomalies are helps you also do your job.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you so very much for your fantastic presentation and your insights and sharing your experience in such a cool area that I think none of us, you know, have ever had that kind of experience except from what we see on television and at NASA. So thank you so much. And thank you for everyone who attended.
Yeah, thanks for the great questions. And make sure you follow us on all of our Axiom Space.
All the social, exactly.
Yeah, interact with us.
Have a great weekend.
Bye-bye.
Take care.